allowing them the expanded ranges, you are giving them a better opportunity to, at a minimum, enter the any kind of negotiations with more leverage. And look, they're doing President Trump a favor. You release this, anything to increase pressure on Putin and get him back on his back foot, because Russian forces are not on their back foot right now. They're on their front foot. They're moving forward broadly along the front line. They're pushing back in Kursk. Not the North Korean troops, but the 6 million rounds of North Korean artillery are having an impact on Ukraine's ability to fight.
The war in Ukraine continues to move painfully slowly. But the battle plan and the role of Ukraine's key allies, that has been developing again over the past day. Just this afternoon, very, very speedily. British Storm Shadow missiles have been fired now at targets inside Russia, according to reports this afternoon. And that would confirm reporting in the Times that Joe Biden has indeed reversed his earlier refusal to okay the firing of Storm Shadows, which rely on US targeting tech. America, of course, has already seen its own ATACMS long-range missiles used into Russian territory. And we're reporting today, of course, that America is also supplying anti-personnel mines to the Ukrainian military for the first time. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin is saying, well, he sees it all as direct aggression by the NATO partners. How will he react? There's been talk of using nuclear weapons in reply to an attack on Russia that need not involve nuclear weapons. Maybe that is just saber rattling, but even if it is, how will Russia respond? What do these developments today really mean? Let's talk, first of all, and welcome to the programme, the Wall Street Journal Ukraine correspondent Matthew Luxmore. Welcome to the studio.
Thanks very much.
Matthew, can you give me, first of all, your analysis of the significance of these developments, British missiles used into Russian territory, first of all?
Yeah, it's a really qualitatively new development in the war. This is something that Russia's been on a kind of big diplomatic push, if you want to put it that way, over the last several months to head off this US decision to permit Ukraine to use firstly ATACMS and then, of course, as you rightly noted, the Storm Shadow and the French equivalent, the Scalp missiles, which rely on US navigation systems. Russia has called this, the attack yesterday using ATACMS by Ukraine, a new phase of the war. And in some ways they're correct. I mean, this is definitely an escalation. I mean, it's a new, the new use of these powerful missiles against Russian territory. So the real question is how Russia will respond. And of course, it's worth noting that the West is responding in granting this permission to Ukraine to, among others, the big influx of North Korean troops to Russia, especially to the kind of embattled Russian Kursk region. So it's both sides really kind of escalating the war at this stage.
So Matthew, as a Ukraine specialist, can you give me some sort of insight into the all-important thinking inside Kyiv, at the top of government, the top of the command structure in Ukraine? Some strategic thinkers in this country I've been talking to, former very high-ranking military commanders who are saying that what's going on here is there's an anticipation that talks are going to have to start sometime in this coming year. Donald Trump becomes president. That's what he wants to see. And he's got the power to pull the plug on support for, very important American support for Ukraine, which drives, well, both sides towards the table, it is believed. And then I talked to a strategist in Kyiv who says nothing of the kind. No one in Kyiv wants to do business with Putin. No one believes what he says. If he strikes a deal, no one will believe that he'll stick to it. What's your reading of that? First of all, on that thinking in Kyiv, is it possible to distill a sort of a clear line of thought?
Well, of course, publicly, Kyiv's official line is that Ukraine is going to regain all the territory that it has lost, which I think defense analysts and definitely Western officials would privately say is not a realistic goal at the moment. Kyiv would, of course, also say that Zelensky, especially, he will not sit down with Putin to negotiate this because Russia's committed numerous documented atrocities against Ukrainians during this war. And it was really after the Bucha massacre, as I'm sure you remember, in April 2022, that Zelensky decided that no talks will be taking place.
Right.
But privately, Ukrainian officials are, and Western officials also, I think, slowly coming around to the realization that some talks need to be conducted over the next year because the level of support to Ukraine, especially with now Trump, who has said that he's going to strike a deal immediately and is a big skeptic as far as aid to Ukraine is concerned, there's a sense that this aid to Ukraine cannot be sustained over the long term. But of course, I don't want to make any predictions as to when those talks will take place.
Look, in your assumptions, just as judging the situation, would you include President Zelensky in that?
In terms of the people who are willing to
talks in the coming year, whatever he may say publicly.
I think he's aware of the fact that there's a huge amount of pressure to talk with Russia, for sure. I think Kiev realizes that.
All right. Matthew Luxmore, really good to talk to you. Thank you for that. Now, we're joined on the line now by Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery, who is the former policy director at the Senate Armed Service Committee in Washington. Welcome back to the program, Admiral.
Thank you for having me.
As always, you're very, very welcome. Can you give me your judgment on what the Biden administration, the White House now, is hoping that the use of those American and now the British missiles will actually achieve?
Well, I think there's a few intents here. One of them is as much about legacy as anything else. I don't think they wanted to leave on the table that they had failed to give Ukraine the opportunity to use these weapons they provided. There's significant criticism from people who support Ukraine in the United States that, giving them ATACMS missiles and then limiting them to, previously sovereign Ukrainian territory was nonsensical. I spent a few weeks in Ukraine doing training last month, and it's obvious to me that as operational planners, you could see targets in ATACMS range that would make a difference. In other words, aggregated troop concentrations, ammunition facilities, logistics facilities, command and control facilities, the Russians, and airfields. The Russians are very comfortable operating out of, within several hundred kilometers of Ukraine's border. By not being able to attack then, these forces then enter the country in a dispersed nature. And the impact of an artillery strike or an ATACMS strike or a HIMARS guided missile launcher strike are much less effective on these dispersed forces. So by giving them the authority to launch ATACMS at a greater range, they're able to provide a more effective attack vector on the Russian forces, and forcing the Russians to move even farther back in their planning, which makes them less efficient. Right. So I think that's the goal.
Is it then possible that giving Ukraine license to use these longer range missiles in the way that's now happening, could that then be symbolic? Not expected to be, not imagined to be a military game changer. It's about showing the sort of support in practice that leaders like Joe Biden and Keir Starmer express over and over again in public.
Yeah, so, well, first of all, we were definitely playing for a tie previously, providing the weapons and not giving these ranges. So by allowing them the expanded ranges, you are giving them a better opportunity to, at a minimum, enter any kind of negotiations with more leverage. And look, they're doing President Trump a favor. You release this, anything to increase pressure on Putin and get him back on his back foot, because Russian forces are not on their back foot right now. They're on their front foot. They're moving forward broadly along the front line. They're pushing back in Kursk. Not the North Korean troops, but the 6 million rounds of North Korean artillery are having an impact on Ukraine's ability to fight.
I mean, it is, I suppose, within the range of possibility that the President Trump, when he becomes President Trump in January, could simply cancel out these decisions. He could then suddenly deny that ATACMS American missiles could be used and deny the use of British missiles to Ukraine. Do you think that is possible, that's likely?
I can't read President Trump's mind, but I can read his book. And I read The Art of the Deal some time ago. And one of the principles of The Art of the Deal is that you negotiate from a position of strength.
Right.
And a position of strength means giving Ukraine this broader latitude to use the weapons, beginning to work another assistance package, turning to our European allies and saying, hey, when we're doing 60 billion, you do 60 billion, not 40 billion.
Right.
And probably oil export, improved sanctioning of the shadow fleet that's distributing Russian oil. And then, of course, something we know he's going to do, which is drill, baby, drill, which is the idea that he's going to expand our production. All these things put pressure on Russia, on the Russian economy, which is completely dependent on oil sales. I mean, they're Senator McCain, my old boss, used to call them a gas station masquerading as a nation state. That's never been truer. All that pressure will get a better deal in the summer.
Right. And so you're not one of those who can envisage when Donald Trump becomes president, something, in effect, a capitulation to Vladimir Putin. You think for Donald Trump, the deal maker, as you say, it is about getting out on winning terms, in as far as that is even possible.
That's certainly my hope and my aspiration, and at least initially my belief. We'll have to see what happens on January 21st.
And what about the new Congress, the new Senate, the new House of Representatives? They will have a say in all of this, won't they?
They will. Now, look, I think the numbers are broadly the same in terms of, there's about 350, 375 Congress, maybe not 350 congressmen that would support Ukraine assistance. That number could go higher if it's a loan instead of a grant. And then in the Senate, there's still 80 plus. So they'll support it. What they won't do probably is Republicans won't buck a president in office and President Trump. So I don't think the Congress is the determining factor here. I think the president is.
Right. So the given reason for licensing the use of these weapons against Russian territory was the arrival of North Korean troops on the battlefield, lent, as it were, to Putin by Kim Jong-un. Now, with them on the battlefield, now in the war, and these missiles being deployed potentially against them, does that give you any cause for concern or even alarm? North Korea has a powerful military at its hands.
Okay. So as I said before, the number one issue is the North Korean artillery. That's like 20 plus years of U.S. production given to the Russians. It's amazing. The troops are 10,500 or 11,000 troops. At 1,100 troops dying a day, that's about 10 days worth of Russian casualties. So the troops as a tactical value, not as important as artillery. But really, I think what you're asking is there's a strategic value. And I do think they have a strategic meaning here. Yeah. This is an outward sign of what we all know in our stomach, which is that Ukraine is fighting four countries: Russia, China, Iran, and most specifically here, North Korea. And that's a big deal.
Yeah. I mean, wherever we go from here, Admiral, there will be a will, won't there, in Washington, before the handover of power to Donald Trump, and certainly before that, to see European allies of Ukraine step up. So I guess there will be a hope, maybe a little bit of pressure, do you suppose, from America on, let's say, France, to use its own longer range missiles, the Scalp missiles, which are very similar to Storm Shadows. Do you think that's going to be what's happening now? And would that be also a significant move?
Well, I think so. I also think there might be a move. First, we're going to push all the Presidential Drawdown Authority, all the Ukrainian Security Assistance Initiative, another $10-12 billion worth of equipment into distribution. That doesn't all get there right away. Some of the stuff is 2-3 years away with orders. All the stuff that's back ordered already coming. And then we need to talk to our European partners. A lot of promises have been made on stuff that would be delivered. Let's get that moving along. And keep the pressure on Putin. So yeah, I think you'll see a lot of that between now and January 20th.
Right. So when you look at the situation now and into the the midst of the future in this coming year, can you say you feel anything like optimistic in your hopes for Ukraine?
Not optimistic, but I'm not yet. I'm not pessimistic. I'm probably skeptical. I'm worried that their center of gravity is being more rapidly approached than the Russian one. Their inability to generate a fighting force of young men trained properly in Poland, brought back and fighting, that's degrading faster than Russia's ability to put 30,000 fresh troops in the front each month to be killed or wounded and sent back home.
All right. Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery, the former policy director at the U.S. Senate Armed Services Committee. Thank you for joining us.